World War I is finally going to come to an end on the 11th day, the 11th month, the 11th hour of 1918. But Wilson, long before this war ends, already has some plans for peace. When we get into what we're going to be doing today, we're going to look at his plans for peace and how it was received. And we're going to do that by looking at two political cartoons. We're going to do some analysis, talk about some reactions to it, and include some relevant outside information. So let's take a good look at our first political cartoon. And right over here in this political cartoon, the figure that seems to be dominating this cartoon is U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. What we do know about Woodrow Wilson is that when the war breaks out over in Europe, he is in his first term of office. He wanted the United States to remain neutral. He was encouraging many Americans also to remain neutral as well, because many of those Americans had their ties to Europe. Many of them had just arrived from Europe, or their parents or their grandparents had come over from Europe. So there was strong ties to Europe when we're looking at Americans. And he did not want Americans taking sides. He also was doing his best to keep the United States out of war. And when it comes to getting reelected, one of the campaign slogans that helps him to get reelected was that Woodrow Wilson kept us out of the war. Unfortunately, in his second term, due to the unrestricted submarine warfare that Germany was launching on Allied ships throughout the Atlantic, he had no choice, along with the Zimmerman telegram also in the background, he had no choice but to get the United States in the war. So now we're looking at a cartoon that's more towards the end of the war. And if you look right here, you also have right over here a branch, an olive branch, if you will, that says League of Nations. The League of Nations, if League of Iroquois somewhat sounds familiar to you, we have a very, very strong similarity there. If you think back to seventh grade and you're looking at the Eastern Woodland people who had a League of Iroquois where the goal for them was to meet. They elected women as their leaders, and the goal there was to maintain peace. So if you're thinking of League of Iroquois, because now you're now seeing League of Nations, the two had similar goals. They were organizations that were going to maintain peace. But as we look a little bit more into this political cartoon, he's handing this olive branch that is the League of Nations over to this dove. What the League of Nations is going to do, and this was a plan that Wilson had in his 14 points plan. This was an organization that Wilson wanted to have nations throughout the world become a part of this League of Nations. And of course, the goal is going to be to avoid another world war. Woodrow Wilson did encourage Congress to, or asked the Congress to declare war on Germany, due to the unrestricted submarine warfare. But this was one of the things that Wilson did not want the United States to get involved in. Due to the large loss of life and casualties, this is something that the world had never seen before. Wilson is very determined to make sure that there is not a world war in the future or any type of conflict like this in the future. And he feels that the best way to kind of prevent that from happening is coming up with a League of Nations. The best way I can think of a League of Nations, since we are talking about middle school or high school, if you're thinking about the League of Nations and you think about your school, we have a guidance office, right? The guidance office, one of the things that they help to do is that they help to maintain peace among students. It is a place where students can actually go to kind of resolve some issues, so this way violence doesn't take place. Does it always work? No. But the thing is that you have to look and you have to have an organization or some sort of controls in place to avoid some sort of conflict. So this is Wilson's goal. The United States is going to come up with the League of Nations because Wilson comes up with it. And the other thing that he's going to want to do is that he's also going to want the United States to join it. But he's going to need some help from the legislative branch to make sure that the United States joins the League of Nations. So now, as we get to this cartoon, we're still continuing to talk about the League of Nations, and hopefully that should become evident as we look right over here at this sign, which says this League of Nations bridge was designed by the President of the United States. So this bridge right over here is going to then represent the League of Nations. And we notice a couple of countries already mentioned on the bridge: Belgium, France, England, Italy. There are going to be some countries that are missing, such as Germany. But if you look right here in the middle, if you were to try and cross this bridge, you would not be successful because there is something missing. This piece right here, the keystone. When you're looking at this political cartoon that actually appeared in a British magazine, the United States right over here, who clearly came up with this idea of the League of Nations, Woodrow Wilson, this keystone is missing from the bridge, indicating that without the United States, this bridge will fail. The League of Nations does continue to exist as an organization, but it's going to continue without the United States. So it's indicating right here that the United States is not going to become a part of it. Therefore, this bridge, probably at probably one of the most important points of the bridge or strongest point, is going to fail as well. And what's going to happen when it fails? You have all of these other countries that are just going to fall below into this nothingness. So Wilson's 14-point plan included the establishment of a League of Nations that he wanted included in the Treaty of Versailles. After all of the carnage and death that the world had witnessed during World War I, he felt that there should be a peacekeeping organization that would kind of keep countries out of wars. There were a lot, though, in the United States, particularly isolationists, who did not want the United States to get involved in a potential conflict or world war. So isolationists opposed the idea of the United States becoming involved in the League of Nations. That's one of those things that's really going to become important, because this was the United States idea. This was Woodrow Wilson's idea. He goes on a 28-day tour trying to convince citizens of the United States that this was a good idea, urging senators to vote in favor of being a part of the League of Nations. Ultimately, he winds up becoming very ill from this, winds up suffering from a stroke, and that was pretty much, the end of his presidency. Henry Cabot Lodge wanted some changes in the treaty. Some of those changes would include ensuring that the United States, if they were going to be in the League, would remain independent in the League. He also wanted Congress to have the power to decide on whether the U.S. would follow League policy. These were a couple of items that Woodrow Wilson would not budge on. So ultimately, Lodge and other isolationists in the Senate felt that the League would involve the United States in another war, and they oppose U.S. participation in the League of Nations. Thank you for watching.